you have to translate whatever problem that you are facing into a math equation or a math problem, and then you give it to the computer so that the computer can solve it. And so that is why it is more important for us to know what is happening in the math, and then what are the different methods in which we approach if this kind of data is coming, what is the better approach or better method to solve this kind of problem. So it will be very basics of matrices and fitting equations or fitting polynomials. So today we'll be covering on basics of linear algebra, just looking at what is a matrix and then matrix and vector operations. And sometimes we need to decompose a given matrix into uh, submatrices so that they can be more easy to handle, and in different scenarios they will be having different importances.
Ayappa, you
Sometimes,
haven't shared your screen. I mean, you have previously you have, but again, you got details.
yeah, okay, sorry. Are you able to see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so when we get the data from the sensor input or from the real world applications, the data is very huge, and we need to decompose the data. And when it is represented in matrices, then you need to know why, which way to decompose the matrix and solve the particular problem. So at the end of the day, you will be solving a linear system of equations or a nonlinear least squares problem, so to say, in any of the applications, whether you go for loss functions of deep learning related applications, or whether you solve for the bundle adjustment problem, or you solve for the triangulation using the triangulation matrix and the projection constraints, or you are solving for a motion planning, or you want to plan a path given set of waypoints where you want to fit a curve and all. So everything, all of these concepts are related to math. And so the basic related maths, we just want to review them. So ideally linear algebra and optimization and calculus, they are a semester long courses. But here what we try to do in 2 hours or 2.5 hours of session is just to know what the terms are and what kind of problems these terms are related to and how to solve them. So as you keep going through all the sessions in these coming summer sessions of RRC, so that you will get to know which of these terms fall into which places, and so you have to remember or recollect what these things are and how this problem can be attacked using this particular math method or approach. So being the first day of introduction, we'll just go through the basics of linear algebra, and I hope that should be clear for today. Yeah, so thanks to our senior Mithun Nalana, he's an MS student here who works on motion planning related and the reinforcement related problems. So he had prepared these slides for you to revise it easily, and I'm reusing them. So why are we doing the math sessions is that we need to review all the important material that we are going to see before we go into the material. And if you are reading the papers related to robotics, you need to understand the equations there, at least what to look for while you are doing a Google search, or if you are referring to a math related content like a course or a textbook. So you need to understand that this problem can be formulated in this particular method. So in that way, this is very important. And so usually these are the problems that you will be dealing with when you are dealing with robots. So the robot needs to know where it is and where it wants to go, and how does it get there. Like if it wants to go in a particular path, then how does it get there? And robots has a lot of, how do you get the data? So you get the data from sensors, and then the data that you get from sensors, you want to process it using the computational resources that are on board. Either sometimes you want to send the data from, say you are doing a quadrotor related thing. Sometimes you have to stream the data from the quad rotor to a base station, and then there you want to process them using additional computational resources. And after processing the data, you want to take the action and then give the input to the actuator so that the robot will move in that particular way. In case of a quad rotor, it will be motors, or in case of a differential drive robot, it will also be motors, but it will, I mean, you navigate on the land and that kind of things. So at the end of the day, we need to get the data, process it, and then act using the data. So to do all of these, you need to model what kind of the data you have to represent them and how do you process. So that is what we call modeling. You need to model the environment in which you are working on. For example, you represent this world as a 3D-dimensional world, X, Y, Z axis, and again, there are different representations of the 3D-dimensional world, whether you take Cartesian coordinates or spherical coordinates or polar coordinates. Mostly we'll be dealing with Cartesian coordinates, and if at all required, then we will see the other kind of things. But there will be some models in which the sensors and how the noise models of sensors, the sensors that we see ideally in the theory or any of the sessions will be, sometimes you take it for granted that the sensor will work in this way, but when you go for the real world, you buy a sensor and you integrate it with your robot, it comes with some noise. So in that case, you need to have a proper noise model. And similarly, the same thing happens with actuators also. It will have some kind of nonlinear effects when you are actually trying to drive it using some voltages and currents that you have computed. So at the end of the day, you have to model the environment, the sensors as well as the actuators, so that you can include all those models, the mathematical models into equations, and get them solved by your algorithm. This is what we'll see if at all. So agnostic of all these models and sensors and computation resources, in first 2 days, we'll just see, given a system of equations, how do we just solve them? It is just a review of your basic high school or even kind of mathematics. It says bad network quality. Am I audible right now?
Yeah, it's quite clear. You can go ahead.
All right. So let's just jump into the basics of linear algebra and why it's so important for us. So we have two equations here. You're able to see the 3u plus 4v equals to minus 6 and all. Now if we represent, so here you can see that there are two variables u and v that solve this particular equation. So in general, we have a lot of methods like forward substitution or backward substitution, or multiplying the first equation with 9 and the second equation with 3, and then hand calculating the equations and all. But how do we make a computer do that? So that is when this matrix representation of a given system of equations come to our rescue. So this can be represented in this way. So if all the coefficients of these parameters are represented as a matrix A, and then you have the parameters u and v, and minus 6 and 3, that is what that system of equation would be solving for. So in case of two parameters, it will be just two variables, say u and v. This is the set of matrices and vectors that you will come across. Now, if you have m number of variables, so you can easily see, I mean, x is an m cross 1. M represents the number of rows and 1 is the column. So it is a column vector. It is a vector. X is a vector here, which means it is m cross 1 vector. And so for two equations, the size of A will be 2 cross 2. For an m number of variables, you will have m cross n, say m cross n number of, you have n equations. For example, if you have n number of equations and m number of variables, you will have the A matrix as m cross n matrix. So this is just representing the given set of equations in terms of matrices. So that is what we are seeing right now. So now you can see that the elements of the matrix A, we can look at this matrix in different ways. So you can look at this as set of rows stacked on top of each other. So that is how this, or there is one more way, like you can look at them as column vectors which are stacked horizontally, and that is what this is representing, A1. So A1 represents a column vector and A2 represents another column vector, and now you have n number of such columns. So this is what a column picture of this matrix can look like. Now if you want to look at as a row picture, so you can represent that this is A1 transpose, A2 transpose, and in that way. So it is the same. The elements of the matrix will not be changing, but the way you look at the matrix sometimes make a difference and you derive the equations in particular way. So that is just a representation of matrices. Now, if we see vectors, I mean, we have these parameters, the variable vector u comma v. So it is a vector. So there are some, the base, we'll see what are the basic operations that are that we usually deal with when we are computing vectors related data. So addition, multiplication, and element-wise operation. I know most of you, I mean, you'll all know that the basic vector addition, you can do it, what you say, element-wise. Say 3, 9 is a column vector and 4, -5 is a column vector. I mean, taking out of this matrix. So you can just add the element-wise components of the vector 3 plus 4 and 9 plus 9 minus 5 will be the resultant vector, resultant column vector if these are two different vectors and you are adding them. And then we have the scalar multiplication and element-wise operation. And we have the dot product also. So x dot y, the dot product you do element-wise product of. So here in this case you say 3 into 4 plus 9 into -5. So that gives you your dot product. And we have a cross product which is having a very interesting applications. Like in general, dot product will give you a scalar. However, cross product will give you a vector which is perpendicular to the direction of both the vectors. So now you might get the doubt that what is a vector? I mean, we are saying just two numbers stacked on top of each other saying u comma v, or -6, 3 is a vector. So in order to visualize that -6, 3 as a vector, you can assume that this is in 2D space, because we have two numbers in a 2D coordinate system, x value -6 and y value 3. So that is a point. So in 2D coordinate system, -6, 3 is just a point. Now how do you visualize that as a vector? So you draw a line from the origin to the point in the direction towards that point from the origin. So that you can imagine as a vector. So while you are visualizing a given vector, you can think of it in that way. So that way you will be able to understand the importance of cross product. Now we have two different vectors which we are wanting to do the cross product on. So you'll get a vector which is perpendicular to both of them. Say you take two vectors in 2D coordinate system in an xy plane, you will get a third vector which is perpendicular to both of them, which means you will get something in 3 dimensions, I mean, which is actually parallel to the z-axis if you take the vectors in 2D. So that is very interesting, and where you want to find an orthogonal direction of both the vectors, that will be very interesting thing to look. What other things that we can see from these vectors? For example, we have x1, x2, x3, so on till xm. This is a vector. How do you define a length of a vector? So we can define length of that. So if in the, while you are visualizing the -6, 3 as a vector, the length of that vector is given by root over -6 whole square plus 3 square. So that is how you define in general in 2D coordinate geometry. The same thing applies here also. I mean, you can do root over x1 square plus x2 square so on till xm square. So that gives you the length of the vector. But why just squaring and adding the terms? So, and why can't we just cube them and take a cube root or other kind of powers? Why can't we try them? Yes, people have tried that, and so there is a term called norm which takes all the elements of the vector and then gives you a non-negative number, that is called norm. And in the norm, if you are taking just the powers as squares and then taking the square root of the resultant squared sum, that you call as length. I mean, you will get the length of that vector. If you take something else, you will get a other kind of entity, mathematical entity that represents that particular norm. So there are different kinds of norms that we will come across. We'll look in the next coming slides. So whatever that is, because we are squaring the numbers and then adding up, so a norm of a vector is always positive. It's always greater than or equal to 0, and it is equal to 0 only if it is equals to 0 if the x is all the elements of the vector 0, and it is absolutely homogeneous. What does it mean by absolutely homogeneous? If you scale each of the elements of the vector and then take the norm of it, it is equivalent to taking a norm of a vector and then multiplying that with the scale factor, the absolute value of the scale factor. So these are just simple properties that people have tried with different values, or that is how they define norm, and this is what we are seeing. What are the properties of a function called norm, which operates on a vector? So if you assume the norm as a function, you take the vector as the input and you get some non-negative number as the output. Now we are trying to see what kind of properties applies to these non-negative number that we got as the output. So when you are adding the two vectors and then taking the norm, so this triangle inequality says that norm of x plus norm of y will always be greater than the x plus y and taking the norm of that. So this comes from, in general, so to connect in general for a geometrical figure, say in a triangle, sum of two sides will never be greater than the length of the third side. So in that way, you can assume this property to be equivalent in general geometry sense. So if you assume the sides to be vectors, so the same applies here also. So when you are taking the norm of sum of vectors, it will be less than or equal to the individual norms, or the other way, vice versa also you can state and then understand. So seeing the Euclidean norm, so whatever we have defined as length, root over x1 square plus root over x square plus y square, which we in general define the distance between the point and the origin. That seems to be L2, that seems to be called as L2 norm or Euclidean norm. Able to highlight that. So here we just square the numbers, sum them, and then take the square root. Now what if we add just the absolute values of each individual value, say mod x plus mod y? That is called L1 norm or Manhattan norm. And there is one more norm called infinity norm, which is like taking the maximum element of all the individual vectors. Say you have x1 to xm as your vector, and you take the maximum out of that you define as the infinity norm. And there is p norm. So instead of squaring, I mean, if you substitute p equals to 2, it is pretty obvious that you get L2 norm, and then you can also get L1 norm substituting p equals to 1. So it is defined in this way, taking the p power of all the elements, summing them, and then taking the p root. Now, so instead of remembering all of these formulas and what these mathematical entities represent in general, this figure here below represents all of these norms. I mean, the p value, if you substitute for p equals to 1, there'll be it can be represented in one fashion, and if it is p equals to 2, it represents another fashion, and so you can visualize all the norms of vectors in a particular way just by looking at this diagram. What are the properties of each norm? Say you have a unit vectors 1, 1. I mean, if you have x, y as your elements of your vector. Now you say x square plus y square is equals to 1. Then what is the geometric figure that it represents? It represents a circle. So that is clearly visible if you take the norm L2 norm. So for example, if you see that forms a circle here, and then if you take p equals to 1, so that gives you this L1 norm. So which is to say, if x and y are the variables, again you will say that x plus y is equals to 1 or 2 or 3. So here that represents, if at all your norm is 1, for example, this is how you can actually visualize that. So x plus y equals to 1 in general represents a line, and that is what p equals to 1 represents here. So what different values of x and y, if x is positive and y is negative, and all the four possible cases, you get this diamond shape of figure. So similarly, if you place p equals to 1.5, or that is 3 by 2, and then if you take the L2 norm, because it represents x square plus y square equals to 1, that represents a circle, and that is what this p equals to 2 represent, and this is the L3 norm, or p equals to 3. And then, so if you have p equals to infinity, we said that it is infinity norm, and we have this, it represents a square, I mean that will appear as a square in our scenario. So you can think through why is it a square. I mean, just looking at the figure, we can see that the norm or the figure is approaching towards becoming more sharpened at the edges. But intuitively, if you see, x can, so you take this, you just pick one of the values, x and y. Say you have the x value as 0 and 1, and y values as 0 and 1 are the two possibilities. Now here, wherever x and y, so if you draw a coordinate axis at the center of the square, and you move the x and y point here, so on the x-axis, always, because when you are traveling on the x-axis, you are always greater than the y value, because y value is 0 at that case, and then you will have x equals to 1 as the limiting scenario. Now if you travel along the y-axis, so you will get y equals to 1 as your norm, and that becomes the that becomes your norm. So that is how, for different values of x and y, as you move towards the infinity norm, can be represented as a square in this figure. So this gives you a snapshot of how the norms look like and how to visualize them in general. So just to recollect, what we are actually trying to see is, given a vector, what are the operations that can be performed, and in general we are starting with the length or the norm of that vector. So various norms can be used. So these norms are used as, just to say where they are used, in general you use them as constraints in while you are doing optimization, or you are doing your deep learning related loss function. So you can use them as your constraints. Say you want a unit vector, you want your x and y values such that its norm equals to 1 or its length equals to 1. In that case, at every iteration you say that this norm minus 1 equals to 0. That is how you use these norms of vectors. So now that we have defined norms, we can also define length and angle. So this can be defined using the inner product. Like, inner product can be similar to the dot product, and it is almost like, for example, you take two elements, I mean two vectors here. In general, if you take two different vectors that we define as the dot product and all, now if you take the same vectors and then you say x dot x, that is what we call it as inner product. So these are the 5 properties that it will be satisfying in general: the homogeneity and the symmetry of inner product. So inner product doesn't, so it clearly says that you take the element wise product and then sum that up. So how these are the properties that it will be satisfying. And so you can see that it returns a real number. So now if you take x and y as different vectors, so this is what we can define in a product as dot product as. Now if you take the same vectors, then you call it as inner product, and then you get to L2 norm. So if you just take x dot x, you will be summing up with x1 square plus x2 square plus x3 square till xn square. We have to understand that, I mean, you have to take square root of that to make it equals to L2 norm. In general, you can take the square root of the inner product that you get in the norm. I mean, it's a different way to just look at the same thing. So if you say x and y, if you just see the x and y as column vectors, I mean, column matrices, then you will not be able to understand what orthogonal vectors are. But if you visualize x comma y, this x is a vector. Here I'm not saying that x comma y is a point. So just be very sure x is a vector and y is a vector, which means for example, in 2D scene, you have a vector which points from origin to the point, say minus 6 comma 3, and then there is one more point somewhere else on the other side of the y-axis, and which is perpendicular to this vector. So the dot product gives you, if the dot product is 0, then you can say that both the vectors are orthogonal to each other. In general, taking apart from the linear algebra and all, in general in vectors also you say mod x into mod y cos theta. Because of the theta, if the theta is 90 degrees, you will get the dot product as 0. That is what we see from the matrices point of view, that it satisfies that also. So there are other ways we can prove the Pythagorean theorem or Cauchy-Schwarz inequality and the triangle inequality using these kind of notations. I mean, you represent the same points and vectors as matrices, and then you take the norm, and then you can prove all of these theorems also. So we can use any other norm in an inner product space to measure the lengths. Like we have different kinds of norms, L2 norm, L1 norm, infinity, and P norm. So in the inner product space, we have, I mean, they are, if you see the spaces that they'll be spanning, the inner product spaces are just what you say, set of the norm vector spaces. So you have lot of norms, but if you see the inner product, they are just one subset. I mean, they just give you the L2 norm, and I mean, taking the square root of it will give you the L2 norm. So you can call that it is the subset of norm vector spaces, and there are something called topological spaces and metric spaces also that. So just for awareness, we are showing this. So all you may be wanting to know is that the norm vector spaces and the inner product spaces now. So we can, if you want, if you are interested, you can go deeply into the metric space and topological spaces also. And what are the other operations that we wanted to see that can be performed on vectors? So we have seen the dot product. We have seen the element-wise operations like just additions and multiplications and homogeneity. Now we come across the cross product. So from the vectors point of view, in general, taking vectors in what you deal with vectors in physics and all. So A cross B is defined in this way, which satisfies the right-hand rule, which you already know. Now, how do you find the cross product of that? So in a three-dimensional space, you know, X will have three components, X1, X2, and X3 along the XYZ axis, and so this is how you will find in general for the cross product of two vectors. Now, if you see this output of the vector x2 y3 minus x3 y2 x1 y3, now how do we represent this as a matrix? So now if you can represent this cross product also as a matrix, then you will be able to get some advantage that you get with matrix representation or vector kind of representation of the given model. So just you can multiply the matrix and vector and then see that it will just satisfy this. I mean, so if you take x2 y3 minus x3 y2, and these are three different components of x cross y vector, so you'll get the column vector after this multiplication. So that we represent as the cross product matrix. So one hidden feature with this cross product matrix, if you clearly observe, is that the diagonal elements are 0. And if you take the transpose and then take negation of it, I mean, take the additive inverse or minus of the elements, you'll get the same matrix again. So this people call it as skew symmetric matrix. So if you want to find a cross product of two vectors x and y, so instead of doing all of this, you just define this matrix. I mean, you form this matrix in your computer, saying in MATLAB or Python, whatever. You take the vector x, x1, x2, and x3. You represent this as the matrix, and you have the vector y1, y2, y3, and you just multiply them. You get the cross product. So representing the same thing. I mean, we all know all of these vectors and dot product and cross product in physics, but now we want to see and how do we represent them in terms of matrices and vectors, so that we can be solving these kind of problems from a computational perspective. Now we are dealing with just one or two vectors till now, and what are the operations on them. Now what if we have linear combinations of vectors, like we have a vector v1 and we want to add them in linear combination. What is a linear combination in general? We take alpha 1 v1 plus, if v1 is a vi is a vector, alpha I vi plus, I mean alpha 1 v1 plus alpha 2 v2 and alpha 3 v3, so on. Then what happens in general is that you get a vector space out of taking the linear combinations of the vectors. You get a so all the linear combinations of elements will get you a space that we call it as vector space. That is also called as span. Now, if you take the linear independence, I mean, there is something called, so if all the vectors are linearly independent, then if the set is said to be linearly independent, and then take the span of that, and I mean, combining these two will give you the basis of that vector space. So we are seeing what are the properties satisfied and what a vector space can be defined in, how can we define that. So there are three things that you need to define a vector space: its span, its basis, and its dimension. So cardinality of the basis is how many vectors do you have in the basis. So if you take the xyz axis and they are orthogonal, I mean they are linearly independent, the unit vectors xyz are ijk are linearly independent, then you have the cardinality of that basis. So ijk will form the basis of the vector space, and the number of basis vectors is 3, so you have a 3-dimensional vector space, which is your just 3D world that you see around. Now all the vectors that are present in that 3D space can be called as the span of that vector space. So any vector you draw in your 3D coordinate system will be part of the span, because it is an element of, I mean, it can be represented as linear combination of these ijk vectors, and ijk can be called as basis. So ijk and xyz are just a 3-dimensional example that we are seeing. Now we can go for higher dimensions also, and that is when these definitions will be useful for you to relate to the 3-dimensional thing. So span, basis, and dimension. And the other operations that we have to perform on vectors is you take the normalized vector. I mean, if at all you take the L2 norm of a vector and it is equals to 1, then you call that it is a normalized vector, because its norm equals to 1. So that is just a name that you give to a normalized vector. Now you don't have a normalized vector, for example, 1, 2, 3 is not a normalized vector. Now if you want to normalize that, I mean, the definition itself, what is the definition of normalization is, you want its L2 norm to be 1. Why L2 norm? I mean, you can take any norm, but in general we take L2 norm as the entity for normalization process. So how do you normalize a vector 1, 2, 3 with elements 1, 2, 3? So if you just divide 1, 2, 3 each element by its L2 norm, and then take the norm of it, you will get its norm to be 1. I mean, you can perform this very simply on your paper and then verify this. And then you have orthogonal vectors. So we have already seen that their dot product is 0. That is what this says. Now you have orthonormal basis E, E1, E2, and E3. So these are similar to ijk in a 3-dimensional world. So in higher dimensions, This can be En in general. So 1, 0, 0 and 0, 1, these form the vectors. For example, in 3 dimensions, 1, 0, 0, 1 will represent the unit vector along x direction, 0, 1, 0 will represent unit vector along y direction, and 0, 0, 1 will represent in the z direction. And then you have the linear transformation of vectors also. So we'll get back to the equation set of linear equations that we have seen at the beginning of the session. So you have the vector u comma v. What this matrix is performing in general on the vector u comma v, say you imagine that u comma v as a point in 2D space. You multiply it with, so in the vectors representation, you multiply it with a matrix. What it gives you is that, I mean, if u and v have some values that we solve for, we get an output of minus 6 comma 3. So this is a different point. So a point u comma v is now transformed to minus 6 comma 3. That is how you can look at a matrix as. So a matrix can be looked as a linear transformation that operates on vectors and gives you a different vector. So it will transform the given vector into a different one. And that is what even operating all these, I mean, you multiply these vectors 3 into u plus 4 into v. So that is actually being represented here in terms of AX, because you get the output as a column vector also again. And there is a different way in which you can see matrix vector product. So it can be seen also as a linear combination of the columns of the matrix A, the weights being the elements of the vector. So x1 is a element, first element. So it multiplies the vector and then you take the sum of all of this. That gives you the same output as matrix into vector product. So it is a different way. So you now got two different ways of looking at the same thing, the matrix vector product. First method writes it's at a vector consisting of dot products. Here we are seeing that 3, 4 dot u comma v as our representation. Instead, we are here looking it as 3 comma 9 into u plus 4 comma minus 5 into v. So you can view that in that manner. So it is linear combination of column vectors. That is a different way of looking at it. Now we can generalize even a bit further in general for matrix into, I mean, so if you go for what if we have two matrices multiplying each other, nothing will change. So you can still view the same thing as like this. I mean, if you see with the dot product kind of picture, you take the dot product of each row with each column. That is how you get A1 transpose B1, the dot product of first row and first column. And similarly, the first row in the second column of the second matrix. So this is a vector. So B2 is a column vector and you can just multiply the same thing from the dot product picture. Or you can see them from the linear combination of column vectors picture. So in that case, A will be a linear combination of the columns of B, or you can take the other way around also. So that is how the matrix and matrix products can be done. These are very basic properties that any matrix multiplication you'll be aware of, that it is not commutating. I mean, AB is not equals to BA. That is what it says. And it is associative, so you can interchange the products. I mean, take the product of AB first and then multiply it with C, and the distributive property. These are very obvious things that you should be already known. And you can take the product of, I mean, transpose of a matrix. So yeah, so this is just reviewing of what a transpose will satisfy. And here comes a trace of a matrix. So in matrix, if you take the diagonal elements and sum them, so here what we see is I comma I represents an element, I comma I. So both the indices are same here because I. So A11, A22, A33, A44, they form the diagonal elements of a matrix, and you take some of them that you call it as trace. And interestingly, this trace satisfies three properties. So if you do the A transpose also, you get the same trace, and you can sum up individual traces. And one more thing is that you get, if you take a product of two matrices, their traces are equal irrespective of the order of multiplication. So this is one of the other property that we can think of. And then you have the inverse of a square matrix. So assume that we have A as a square matrix. It in general satisfies these properties, and it is the definition of inverse of a matrix. Now you take the, I mean, these are very just obvious properties that you can see. One interesting or thing that you have to focus is that inverse may not exist for all square matrices. So what is the condition in which for an inverse can exist for a matrix is that we will see that, I mean, I think for some particular values of determinants, if the determinant is of particular values, only then the inverse exists, and otherwise it will not exist. So what it should be satisfying, you can look at. Now you have the row rank and column rank of a matrix. So what you say is that the largest subset of rows of A that constitute a linearly independent set. So what do you mean by linear independence in general? So earlier we have seen that any vector can be represented as a linear combination of other vectors. Now if you have a vector and it cannot be represented as a linear combination of any other vector, then you can say that that itself is a linearly independent. And now we have a matrix. You have n number of say columns here, and out of this n number of columns, only r of them are linearly independent. Remaining n minus r are just linear combinations of these r column vectors. Then you say the column rank of that matrix as r. Similarly with the rows also, you can define the number of rows that are linearly independent, I mean, which cannot be represented as a linear combination of any other thing. So that is what linear independence comes from. So rank of A is equals to, again, rank of A transpose. I mean, that you can see, so it is not very obvious directly from the equations, but if you take an example and then try to solve it, then you can see why it is more thing. I mean, you can also look into the lectures by Professor Gilbert Strang, who is the actual currently pioneer of the linear algebra, and who actually does a lot of teaching on this, and very good courses are available on him. So take an example and then you can verify that row rank is equals to column rank. Why? Because from the fundamental theorem of linear algebra, you have different spaces, the row space and the column space. And from them, the row rank and column rank can be derived in that way also. So you can do it with taking an example, or you can dig into the actual theory why this will be true. Now we will just see what are the properties that a rank will be satisfying. So if you take the sum of two matrices and then take the rank of them, so this is how the resulting rank will satisfy. And so we said that inverse cannot be existing for all square matrices. So when will that happen? When we say that inverse doesn't exist, it means that A is not full rank. For example, you take a 3 cross 3 matrix, and two of the rows are linearly independent, and the third row is just sum of the first rows. For example, it can be sum or any linear combination of the first two rows. In that case, we say that the rank is 2. So there are only two linearly independent equations in that 3 cross 3 system, that which is represented as a matrix. In that case, you cannot solve that matrix directly. So in a way, you can say that inverse does not exist when A is not full rank. That is what this sentence means. Now you have something called range and null space of a matrix. So you have the span of vectors. So we have come across this space, vector spaces. Now what about the spaces of matrices? So there is something called column space, there is row space. They are pretty obvious if you understand what is vector space, the span, dimensionality, and dimension and the basis of a vector space. You can extend it to matrices also. Now you take the rows of a matrix as the row vectors, and the vector space that is spanned by that particular rows of a matrix, that can be called as a row space. And now you take similarly you take the columns of A, and you take the span of those column vectors. that you call it as a column space. Now, what is a null space? So you have a system of equations, say Ax equals to B, and you want the set of vectors that satisfies Ax equals to 0. So that you call it as null space. I mean, whenever you take a matrix and then you multiply, so there will be a lot of vectors that can be satisfied, that can satisfy the equation Ax equals to 0. That you define it as a null space. So null space is a set of vectors when multiplied by A give you a 0 vector. So these are just properties and operations that are performed on matrices. But how they'll be applicable in when you are solving the equations or solving a particular set of problems, that you have to we'll see in the coming sessions. So similarly, we have defined the row space and the null space. They are actually orthogonal components of one another, the row space and the null space. So one more thing is that, I mean, as we already defined that the row rank is equal to the column rank. That means the number of linearly independent rows is equal to the number of linearly independent columns. So if you have the number of linearly independent rows and columns are as equal, so you can say that row space can be represented as column space of A transpose. I mean, if you just take the A transpose, they'll become the column, the rows will become the columns, and you take the column space of that you can actually represent as row space. So instead of saying row of A, you can say column of A transpose. That is just a different representation. And why do we say that column of A transpose intersection n of A is equals to 0? Because the null space itself is defined in that way. So whenever you multiply A with vector X, that means that you are actually taking the dot product of each row with the X vector. So it gives you 0. So it gives you a 0 vector. That means each and every row in the row space are orthogonal to that vector. So that is why you say that row space and null space are orthogonal complements of one another. And similarly, for a matrix, you can define a determinant. Intuitively, I mean, all the linear combination of rows. So by the definition of a determinant, you can look at the cross product definition where we define the cross product. Here we say the determinant as I into x2 minus x2y3 minus x3y2. So that is the in general definition if this itself is a matrix A. If you see the coefficients of these products here, x2 y3, I mean, take this element x1 y3 or x3 y1 j. So you have -1 or +1, or sometimes some elements, other products are missing, so they can be 0. So what we mean to say is that if you take the determinant of a matrix, so they are just the coefficients lie between 0 and 1. I mean, if you take, so we take the minus of them, but if you take the immediate coefficients, they are just either 1 or 0. Either the product term is present or not present in the determinant. And the value of the determinant is volume of the set S, if S is a set of all the linear combinations of row vectors such that the combination lie between 0 and 1, then the absolute value of determinant will give you the volume of determinant, I mean set S. So this is a geometric, what you say, interpretation of the determinant of a matrix or geometric application. If you want to find the volume of a set S, you take the determinant of its matrix representation and you get the volume. And you have the different properties that are satisfied the determinant also. And we have orthonormal matrices now. So the two terms ortho and normal. Ortho represents orthogonal. So they are perpendicular to one another. I mean, their dot product is 0. But when you say normal, so that gives you normalization or normal. So its norm is equals to 1. Now, if the columns are orthogonal to one another and each column is normalized, then if you take the U transpose U, I mean, if it is normalized, you say U transpose U will give you an identity. So inverse of an orthonormal matrix is its just transpose. So from this definition, U transpose is equals to I and U is equals to. So you can take the inverse, I mean take the U to that side and you get U inverse is equals to U transpose. Now we'll see different matrices which are of quite very often used in solving the problems. An identity matrix is zero matrix with all the diagonal elements 1, and you can take a symmetric matrix as this is the definition. I mean, if A is equals to A transpose, it is the symmetric matrix. And similarly, we have anti-symmetric matrix. Now, if you remember a few slides ago, we have seen an example of an anti-symmetric matrix which has occurred when we are trying to represent a cross product in matrix representation. So you take the anti-symmetric matrix version. So you take any vector and then represent its anti-symmetric matrix version and then multiply with another vector, you get the cross product. So an anti-symmetric matrix itself is defined in this way. You take A and A transpose, the A transpose will be a negative of the A matrix. Now there is something called triangular matrix. If the elements are such that you form a triangle of zeros in the matrix, I mean, we have a non-zero elements until the diagonal and we have a zero elements below the diagonal. So it can be right, left triangular matrix or lower triangular matrix or upper triangular matrix. If it is below the diagonal, the principal diagonal, then it is called lower diagonal matrix, and if it is above the diagonal, it is called upper triangular matrix. Now you can take a diagonal matrix with all the zeros and identity. So identity is just a specific case of a diagonal matrix. A zero matrix is just matrix with zeros. Now we have something called Frobenius norm. So we have defined norms for vectors, but we never have defined norms for matrices. Now let us see few norms for one norm for a matrix. It is the same thing. I mean, you are squaring each and every element of the matrix and adding them, and then you're taking the square root of it. So that we call it as Frobenius norm. So this Frobenius norm has some different applications. In some cases, solving a system of equations constrained with the Frobenius norm sense will give a particular kind of output, and those importance are there. Now you have Kronecker product is defined in this way. So you take every element. I mean, if you see A cross A, what you say cross B, here it is not a direct vector cross product, but it is a Kronecker product. It is defined in this way. So it will blow up the output. So if you take A as M cross N matrix and B as some another M cross N, so you will get a blowed up version, because you will have these many copies for each and every element in A. So there is a matrix here B, and each of the matrices are again multiplied by those versions, those individual elements. Now till now we have represented a linear system of equations and all the vectors which are from the 2D coordinate system or any other coordinate system into a matrix representation, and we are seeing their properties. Now we can also represent quadratic functions. Say there is a quadratic function x1 square plus x2 square plus x3 cube, or in that way. That is a polynomial in general. But if you take a quadratic function, I mean, if you take a second order function that we call as quadratics, and it forms conics, I mean, so different sections of cones that we call them as conics, like circles, ellipses, parabola, hyperbola. They are just a different, different versions of the same quadratic form or second degree function, second order function. Such functions can also be represented in a matrix form. So that is what is the importance of these symmetric matrices. So you have a polynomial like xi, xj, I mean, it represents x square here, if I equals to j. And so you take the product of them. So x square plus y square plus 2xy is one such second order function. So you can represent this particular equation as a matrix form. So how do you do that? You if you take a symmetric matrix, that will satisfy this, because so each product term of each individual element of the x value, xi xj into aij. So aij is the coefficient here. I mean, performing some operation here, you take the xi out of the summation and then you represent in this way. Ax is a vector again, because aij represents a matrix, xj represents a vector. So ax represents a vector and a can be taken as a matrix now. Now you do the summation, you say that x transpose ax. So you can represent any second order function in terms of a matrix, a symmetric matrix. Now if you take the symmetric matrix, so if you take the quadratic functions in general in 2D coordinate system, say a parabola, so you can infer lot of geometric properties, whether the parabola lies above the x-axis, whether it intersects with the x-axis, or what is the area of the intersection with x-axis and the curve. So those kind of different properties are there. So can we infer those kind of properties from the matrix itself, because the symmetric matrix here represents the same quadratic function. So there are some properties called positive definiteness and positive semi-definite, or negative semi-definite, or negative definite. Now if x transpose ax, so if you see x transpose ax, it is just the summation of the individual products, which means you will get as output as a scalar quantity. So that scalar quantity, if it is positive, then it is called positive definite matrix. Then A is said to be positive definite. So if you take a positive definite matrix, what are its implications on the quadratic form? So why are we looking at the positive definite matrices and the quadratic forms? Because when you go for control related applications, whether you want to perform a nonlinear control on a quadrotor, in that case, so when we are getting the state space representation of the dynamics of the quadrotor or any other control system, while solving that particular problem, you should be choosing a positive definite matrix such that it is stable or it is not stable. So the stability related issues can be controlled by taking whether you take a positive definite matrix or whether you take a negative, which is non-positive definite matrix or positive semi-definite matrix. So it may not be directly obvious here while reading the equations, but when you go to the control applications, when you define stability terms and conditions, so you represent the entire system state space equations in matrices, then you come across this particular thing. And here we have one more very important thing called eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So eigenvectors are that satisfy the Ax equals to lambda x in general, and lambda is called an eigenvalue, and x that satisfies this particular equation will be called as eigenvector. And now there are some properties that we can infer from the eigenvalues. So if you just sum up all the eigenvalues, you get the trace, and then if you take the product of it, you get the determinant of that. Now we want to see how a given matrix can be decomposed into its eigenvectors and eigenvalues. If you see x is a vector, so ax1 and each individual element can be written in this form. If you put all the vectors, all the eigenvectors stacked, horizontally stacked, you can say AV equals to V sigma, where sigma represents a diagonal matrix here. Now, if at all V is invertible, if all the eigenvectors matrix V is invertible, then we can represent A as V sigma V transpose. And so this kind of factorization will give you a particular advantage for different applications. So today we are just looking at what are the properties available and how we can decompose a matrix and what are the ways in which we can represent the given set of equations in a matrix. So their applications and where these particular things are useful, we'll look at them in the coming sessions, and in the assignment also we'll be trying to solve these kind of problems where you apply these decompositions and where this can be very useful. And you can decompose a given matrix into other matrices also. Say Q is an orthogonal matrix. So we have already defined what an orthogonal matrix. So orthogonal matrix will have all its columns as orthogonal. I mean, so every column you take the dot product with another column of the same matrix, you will get a zero vector. So that is a Q, and S is a symmetric matrix. So you can decompose a matrix into Q into S, and if we can also represent a symmetric matrix if you decompose it as eigenvalues. So Q sigma V transpose, and then you get U sigma V transpose. This is a very famous decomposition called singular vector decomposition of a given matrix UVD, SVD. And here, if you see the properties of the matrices, we have the U and V are orthonormal matrices, and D will be a diagonal matrix, obviously, which will come from the eigenvalues. So for a square matrix, you will say that this is a eigenvalue matrix, U and V form the eigenvalues, but for a non-square, for a rectangular matrix, you will have U and V sigma. The elements of sigma are called singular values. So U and V are called the left and right singular vectors of M. So that is one decomposition, and there is a different decomposition. So you'll also see that SVD forms a very, very particular importance. I mean, it is very important in solving a linear least squares kind of problem. So there are various decompositions that will be helpful for us in solving the linear system of equations when you are performing the operations. So in general, while you are solving any computer or multiple view geometry related applications or path planning, you will get, especially in the computer vision or multiple view geometry, you will be dealing with matrices which are very big. I mean, you have say 100 number of points that you want to triangulate at the same time, and you have 100 number of variables there, and you have say 5 or 10 views, and that is an underdetermined system of equations. And sometimes you will be coming across overdetermined system of equations. So in those cases, these decompositions will play a vital role in solving those equations. So we'll see how they are useful in the coming sessions also. So while you're dealing with multiple view geometry sessions, there you will understand why the importance of SVD and these things. Another decomposition is LU. So you decompose the given matrix into a lower triangular matrix and an upper triangular matrix. So in general, when you are solving the system of equations on paper without a matrix representation, this is what ideally you will be doing. So you will try to eliminate each and every variable. Say you have two equations, the very first set of equations, 3u plus 4v equals to -6 and 9u minus 5v equals to 3. So you try to eliminate one of the variables first, you find that value and you back substitute that. So that when you represent as vectors or in terms of matrices, you can term them as LU decomposition. What you say is you decompose it into lower triangular and upper triangular matrix, and then you remove one of the coefficients, and that is how you eliminate each and every element to 0. So this can be computed using the Gauss-Jordan elimination. So in Gauss-Jordan elimination, you take the pivot elements of A matrix, and you want this element to be positive and all of them, I mean, non-zero, and all of the other first column vectors to be 0. And then you go to the second column, and then you diagonalize a given matrix like this, so into lower and upper triangular. So in that way you can compute the lower and upper triangular matrices. So you can use it a lot of in system of equations. And there are other variants like LU decomposition. Now we have already seen the variant of QR decomposition here. Q into S. Here S is a symmetric matrix. So if S is not a symmetric matrix and instead it is an upper triangular matrix, then we use it. You call it as QR decomposition. This is a very, very say important kind of decomposition which is used a lot in different applications. So for today, after this session, so as a take-home exercise, you can see what is the importance of QR decomposition in solving the system of equations. I've said that the system of equations can be solved using SVD, and it can also be solved using QR decomposition, and there is one more decomposition called Cholesky decomposition, and you can search through and explore what are the differences between these three decompositions and which of them will be useful for solving a given system of equations. So that you can perform as a take-home exercise for today, before the next session, and the assignment anyway will cover in the next session. See, there are other variants, like if you represent the same matrix as RQ decomposition, it will have a different set of applications. So yeah, as you mentioned, the Cholesky decomposition also. So now instead of upper triangular matrix, you take lower triangular matrix and then you represent this in this way. Why do we call this as Cholesky decomposition? Because we actually use the Cholesky algorithm to use the decomposition of the matrix in different variants of Kalman filters. So you will come across the Kalman filters when you are trying to do the localization, and when you are dealing with SLAM related problems, you will come across the Kalman filters a lot. Or in the state estimation, especially when you want to estimate the state of a current robot from the data of different sensors, and you want to fuse them, and then you want to determine that. So then you will come across something called Kalman filters, where this will be very useful. There are other variants called LDL decomposition, etc. And these are few references that have been used last time, and I have added few other references in the GitHub issue, and that you can go across, come across. I mean, there is a latest course on just a 5-video course from Professor Gilbert Chang of MIT, and you can go across that also. So that gives you a very brief overview of all the things that we have discussed here, as in a very example oriented way. So he takes the examples of matrices and then derives them. So with the terms, now you have just reviewed what are the terms are available. I don't think, I mean, you can go through the slides in deep and then read through them, and so take the examples, and then working out will give you a better understanding of these things, so that you'll be ready for you to take up the problems in the coming days. So yeah, this is the overview of linear algebra, and if you have any questions, you can ask now, or you can post it on in the Teams. We will respond, or you can mail me. So thanks for this today's session. Any questions? So yeah, if there are no questions, then we can end the session for today, and yeah, we can start at the same time, 3 o'clock tomorrow, with terms in optimization and calculus. Shubha, do you want to add something to this session? Hello, am I still audible? Can someone please respond on the? Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, all right. So if yeah, nothing else is there, we can end the call now, and yeah, you can post the queries, go through the slides and the references that I have mentioned. All right, thanks for joining.